Joe Straus of San Antonio was elected in 2005 to represent House District 121. He is in his third term as Speaker, seeking a fourth term as Speaker in January. It makes him the Joint Chairman of the Legislative Budget Board, the Legislative Audit Committee, the Texas Legislative Council. He previously worked on numerous campaigns for federal, state, and local candidates. He was a District Director for U.S. Representative Lamar Smith, worked in the Commerce Department under Robert Mosbacher. He was an unnoticed candidate for Speaker until a small group of Republicans decided among themselves in a house over on Polo Road here in Austin to back him in January 29 and quickly put together a coalition that wanted to end the reign of Tom Craddick as Speaker of the House. That win formed the chief gripe heard to this day from conservatives who don't like Straus, that the Democrats were in on it, and so that can't be good. He's got a well-financed opponent this time, some wealthy political foes ahead of him after the election, but looks like he's in pretty good political shape, and that's where we'll start. House Speaker Joe Straus.
Thank you. Morning. Hi, how are you? Thank you. Thank you. Hey, Russ. Thank you. Good morning.
So why do you still want this job?
Well, we have a lot of work still ahead of us, and I'm proud of the record that we've accomplished the last 3 sessions as I've served as Speaker. And I really haven't slowed down to think about doing anything else.
Yeah. Let's talk about the first thing that's going to happen here. You know, we're going to elect whoever we elect on November 4th. There's a lot of talk about...
You want me to tell you?
That'd be great. That'd be, go ahead and fill in the blanks. There's a lot of talk about Scott Turner, state representative from Frisco, who's running for Speaker, has filed, and about sort of this existential threat. There's some money behind efforts to overthrow you, and so walk me out of the election and all the way up to your election in January.
Well, I think the most important thing that a Speaker needs to do, and that I've tried to do and have done the last 3 sessions, is to work hard at the job I have, that I was elected to do, to be a good Speaker, to support the members, taking care of the politics for sure, which I've done, helping Republican incumbents in their primaries and helping some members who are in contested races, the tougher-looking competitive races in November, and taking care of the business of the House of Representatives. I think it would be not an understatement to say that there is so much activity going on in the Capitol right now that it almost looks like we're in the session today. And that's not an accident. We're building the agenda. We're getting ready for the work ahead that starts in January for 140 pretty hectic days. So I think, tying it back to answering your question, the best thing that a Speaker can do to be reelected is to do the job well, to take care of the politics, to take care of the House of Representatives, to show respect for the members, and to get the job done.
Is the noise going into it destabilizing to that process?
Destabilizing?
Yeah, I mean, does it increase uncertainty? How are the members with it?
It's a little distracting, and it's unfortunate, but it's a fact of life. It's everywhere in politics today. I don't know whether it's just the continued proliferation of social media, where everybody can be a pundit and a commentator, and it's not all bad to have that many voices out there, but you've got some that are backed with an amazing amount of money, so they get the attention that they pay for. Mm-hmm. But I think the members are smart enough to see through what's real and what's not, and who's doing a quality job.
Is there a way to do this without sort of always being in siege state? I mean, when Tom Craddick was Speaker, there was always an effort against him. You were finally a successful part of the effort against him, but there's always, I guess the last couple of terms of Pete Laney, certainly the last couple of terms of Gib Lewis. Is there a way to be Speaker without just always being, in the castle in defense?
I don't think there's a way to be Speaker where 100% of the people are happy. Right. Unless you do nothing, you can probably get by. But our accomplishments have been something I think are pretty terrific. Mm-hmm. And we have a culture in the House right now of being focused on the issues that are really important to this rapidly growing state: education, water, infrastructure, and taking care of things that the millions of new Texans that are coming along need to have. Some would rather have politics in Texas that more closely mirror what we see in Washington. I don't want that. I don't think Texans want that. I don't think the members of the House of Representatives want that. And so I think they're, it's not unanimous, but I think an overwhelming majority of the members of the House support the way we do our business and get our jobs done.
When you have outside groups, there's sort of two versions of how the House works. There's the House version, which is always some version of leave this to the members, and the speaker's race is an inside game. Everybody's representing a population, but it's not really about outside politics, it's about inside politics. The other view is increasingly that this is about outside politics, that there are groups on, outside who are, whipping voters to whip members to influence what the House does, whether it's a speaker's election or an election or a vote on an issue or whatever. Is that a healthy part of this, and is that what makes it more like Washington?
It could trend that way.
Right.
But this is my fourth election as Speaker coming up. It will be the fourth very different House of Representatives from the first one that elected me Speaker. In 2009, we had almost an even split, Republican and Democrat, 76-74. Right. And then in the election of 2010, we built a very strong Republican majority, kept it in the last cycle, and I think we're going to keep it again this time. But there's been enormous turnover too. I think over half of the members of the House will be serving in their third or fewer less terms than others. So this is a changing scenario inside the House, which is not all bad. But the external politics are new and they don't go away. They're not going to go away. But the internal side of it, I think, is really stable, even though we have fresher faces coming through. They catch on in a hurry. They know they're elected, just like I am, from one of 150 districts around the state. And there's only one speaker, and he's elected by the other 149 members. So it works itself out, and I approach it the same way this time as I did in 2009. I reach out to other members. I don't close the door on anyone. I don't think that bipartisanship is a four-letter word. I reach across the aisle, work with Democrats, work with Republicans, I work with everybody. And let the system work.
There's a faction in your party that does think it's a four-letter word. Is that a big, analyze the House for me a little bit. How much, we hear a lot about that outside, that may be our fault, because we're fight promoters. But how much of the House's business is influenced by these factions, and this group that thinks you should never work with Democrats, and this group over here that thinks you should never work with conservative Republicans, and how many factions do you have in there, and how do you
I don't know.
wander through that?
I think you could dissect the House any number of ways, and it depends on the issue you're talking about.
Right.
There's some issues that cut completely outside of partisan considerations. There's rural and urban. There's fast growth, and there's areas of the state that are going the other direction. Right. There's natural resources issues where you have areas of the state that have an abundance of water and areas of the states that don't, that doesn't. So it's really, when you get into the issues, you can better analyze the House. You can't just say, well, here's the House, give me one blanket assessment of it. It doesn't work that way. It's much more complicated. And that's not bad.
Let's talk about the lead up to the session. A lot of the last year, maybe 18 months, has been about the University of Texas, about the Board of Regents, Wallace Hall. And I think what he would say he's trying to get to here is the idea that legislators and politicians and others in positions of power have been able to influence the admissions process at UT, that he's trying to get to the bottom of this, doing what regents are supposed to do. This is his version of this. Could you walk me through this UT thing and tell me where you think we are in this, how you think this is going to go, and how the politics link back to the session?
Well, first of all, I think I'm pleased to be on the campus of the University of Texas at Austin, but I'm awful sick of it being the only campus in the state of Texas that gets this much attention. It's crazy. And
I don't think Texas Tech wants this attention.
No, or A&M, or the schools in Corpus or Beaumont or down in San Marcos or anywhere else, community colleges. It's you know, too much focus on UT Austin and too much turmoil here. And it all ties back, I believe, to the dysfunction of the Board of Regents that we've seen. And I believe it ties directly back to the fact that those 7 solutions didn't find 5 votes, and frustration about that.
So this is the idea that you should change higher education and you should form it around efficiencies and outcomes.
Yeah, I don't even know what they are, but I think there's been a lot of anger and frustration and turmoil in the board itself. And I hope that's coming to an end. I have some optimism that we're about to turn the page on this. I think it's an excellent thing that Admiral McRaven, who's coming in, has created very high expectations from everyone, and I hope he meets them. I think people are really counting on him to help kind of turn the page here. Plus the fact that our new governor will be making some appointments to the board, I believe early next year. So I think we're hopefully about to work our way through this period. Give the other campuses around this enormous state of 26 million people a little attention.
Does the Hall thing go forward from here? I mean, McRaven is coming in place of Figueroa. You're going to have a new president after Bill Powers leaves. I think he's resigning in June. You'll still have 6 of the current regents. Aren't they just free to keep pursuing back to the 7 steps, back to the things that they want to do? Why did the politics change?
Well, because you'll have new leadership, and I don't know. I don't even know which regions are going off, but you'll have some fresh faces in there, and I hope that the new governor, Governor Abbott, will be mindful of where we've been and think through who the new appointments will be to help us get to a new place. I think you'll find. I think the regents will find that the legislature wants a better relationship with them and with all of higher education.
What do you think is going on with admissions? Do people in the Capitol have the ability to put their thumb on the scale and say, I'd like for that kid to get in?
No, I don't think so. I think what's going on here is a manufactured issue to steer away from what I think is the real issue, so they can't, this minority faction of the Board of Regents can't get their policy aims accomplished. I know I can only speak for myself in terms of writing letters. I've written some. I happen to represent a House district in San Antonio that has excellent public schools. With this top 10% thing, there are a lot of kids who once upon a time would have had no trouble getting into the University of Texas who can't get in now. Right. Not easily, not automatically. And I know people in the community, people know me, and they ask me to write letters for their kids. I'm happy to do it. But very clearly, there's no expectation that a kid's going to get in because I write a letter. In fact, I even wrote a note to President Powers saying, Bill, this is early on, one of the first times, I guess, when I was in the legislature. Bill, this is a courtesy to a constituent. I would never expect political implications for an admissions decision.
What's the point of being in office if you don't have the clout to get somebody into college?
Well, it's a lot more than that.
Isn't there sort of an expectation that, I ought to be able to, maybe I ought to be able to put my thumb on the scale?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that's it at all. But I do hope that we haven't gotten to a place where people who are in elected offices aren't thought of as people that you don't want recommendations from.
Right.
I hope there's some people that conduct themselves in such a way in elected office that they are leaders of their community and people that others would seek out for recommendations.
So they have this investigation going on about what actually happened, trying to figure out whether anybody did successfully bend this process. You had a couple of legislators try to jump, I guess a couple of fellow members of your delegation from San Antonio try to get into this process. Talk about that. Is the House, is this thing with the House and the legislature and UT's regents going to continue to boil for a while?
I hope not.
What do you expect?
Paul Foster, I think Paul Foster has his hands full. I think he's a really good man, and I think he's trying to to get things under control, and I think he will be able to ultimately. You know, how many investigations do you need? What are you looking for? Is there transparency in this latest one? I don't know. I can understand the frustrations of the members that wanted to have a look, but I don't endorse that approach or think that that necessarily is the right way to do it. I also don't think that another investigation or another investigation after that is necessary. People write letters. I know every letter I write, I expect to see on the front page of the newspaper. I'm not embarrassed about it. Don't say things in letters I don't want other people to know.
How linked do you
Now,
think?
now, I will say one other thing that I don't think any study is ever going to find out. What about the whispers? What about the recommendations of very powerful people in this state who don't put it in writing?
Well, it seems to me like if you were going to make a constituent happy, you would write a letter and say, here's the letter I wrote for your kid. Good luck to you. But if you really wanted the kid in, you would make a phone call.
I would think so.
Right.
Or go to the box at the football game, put your arm around somebody, and or regents I'm sure do it.
Right.
So it's again, I think it's a manufactured issue. I think you have to have some faith and confidence in the administrators of your colleges, and it's not just UT Austin, it's every campus. It just happens to be maybe more of a point here because of the internal politics of the Board of Regents, but also because of the automatic admissions rules. So it's certainly not a scandal, and in my view, it's a manufactured issue.
Let me ask you a black helicopter question. Is the stuff that's going on at UT and some of the groups that are trying to get a new speaker and a new faction advanced in the House, and both in the elections themselves, Empower Texans has come up a lot in this, the ethics investigations of Michael Quinn Sullivan and that group, conversations about new rules. Is all of this of a piece? Is all this the same thing?
Well, I think it wouldn't take Sherlock Holmes to tie together some of the personalities who are involved in this. There's one very wealthy guy in Midland and a couple of his friends who fund a lot of this. They want a Speaker of the House, very clearly, who will do what he's told, who will do what he's told by them. They don't have one.
Mm-hmm. What would they tell you to do?
I have no idea.
They haven't tried to.
I don't talk to them.
Say, hey, do this. They didn't do the first thing.
Apparently, something other than what I'm doing.
I want to talk a little bit about ethics. I know this isn't really in your park yet, but it might be. The Ethics Commission has written a couple of rules. One of them is about disclosure of funds into third-party groups in elections. One of them is about what separates a lobbyist from an advocate. And there's another question to that, what separates a lobbyist from an advocate from a reporter, that I think you're going to probably have to deal with here pretty soon.
Okay.
If the courts, the courts have these questions right now, but if the courts bail on this, does this come to the legislature, and what's the legislature's mood about these things? What's your sense of it?
I hate to keep saying I don't know, but I don't know. I know that this one...
Well, what's your sense of it?
Well, I have, on the money side of it, I have a very clear personal view. I don't know that it's shared by a majority of my colleagues, but I believe in transparency and financing of campaigns. I don't believe in limits, because you can always find a way around that. But I believe in disclosure and transparency. I don't know that the federal courts see it that way, and I don't know that my colleagues see it that way. That's my personal opinion.
Shouldn't I be able to associate with others and do it anonymously so that I'm not under attack just for expressing my political views through a group?
Well, again, I don't know how to define it, but yes. But when you get into a direct campaign situation where there is a candidate that they're trying to defeat or elect, then I think it's a different situation. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Again, my personal view. I don't know that it's shared by others.
What about the other question? You've got somebody talking to, you've got somebody talking to members of the legislature without registering and without saying who or what group he is representing necessarily. Talking about Michael Quinn Sullivan here, but there are others, actually. Where should the line be between, I just want to call my state rep and do something, or my state senator, or my group is interested in doing that, on the one hand, and on the other hand saying, you need to sign up. You're AT&T. I mean, these are kind of.
Well, I think there are rules. I'm not, familiar specifically with every one of them, but I think there are rules that he clearly didn't qualify under. I mean, he's not a volunteer.
Right.
And he's not working, for the United Way.
If he was working for the United Way, it'd be all right.
Well, I don't know. If the United Way fits under whatever the law is, it would be.
Right.
If it doesn't, it wouldn't be. But I think it was an 8-0 unanimous view of the Ethics Commission that he didn't qualify to do what he did without registering, and that's where his problem is.
Okay. There's this is a peripheral issue that I'm interested in. They may not be, but there's a question about who is a reporter, and it used to be easy to say that one works for a newspaper, that one works for a TV station, that one works for radio. Now it's blurry, and there are groups and there are journalists who work for publications of whatever kind that have an ideological viewpoint. One of them's 60 years old. The Texas Observer's been here for ages. When you get to this point where you're looking at a spectrum of people calling themselves journalists who include sort of like, old school definition of journalists all the way to maybe this is an advocate, do we let them on the floor of the House? Where's the thinking on this right now?
I don't know where the thinking, I don't know. I do know what I would like to see happen, and that's I'd like for the press association or the whatever organization is out there of media members to kind of maybe self-describe what's legitimate and what's not. I don't know, but the media landscape clearly is changing. The Texas Tribune is an example of that. But those that have a political point of view that then engage in campaign politics, and they're nothing but political consultants who are, working in the off year, maybe fit under a different definition. But the San Antonio Express News makes endorsements in campaigns, so I don't know where the line is, but it's a tricky one and it's complicated. And again, I'd like for maybe the media associations to help us sort it out.
Most states don't allow the press on the floor of their chambers. Is that going to continue? I mean, there was a time when the press was on tables down the middle aisle of the House, and they decided there was too much monkey business going on there, so they moved us off to the side. Does the press?
So it's all the monkey business is us now, right?
Well, yeah, leave that to you guys. Does the media belong on the floor of the House at all?
Well, I think outside the rails is they're on the floor, but not in the restricted areas. I haven't had a problem with it, but I don't know how things might change. I just went to a meeting of fellow speakers of the House from around the country, and I hadn't really talked about this with anyone, but it came up in our meeting. It's funny, some of these same issues that come up, ethics-related issues and media credential issues and those sorts of things are popping up in all states, not just here. And I was surprised there's a real diversity of how the media is handled. A lot of them are not allowed on the floor, I understand. I'm not necessarily in favor of that, but it's going to be tough to know where to draw the lines these days.
Tell me how this session's going to go. So when you came in 2009, you were the new guy. You'd only been here a minute. Now you're the speaker. This time you're the old guy, regardless of how the elections go, or the most experienced guy. You're not old. Most experienced guy, no matter which lieutenant governor, no matter which governor you get, everybody else is sort of new at their job. How do you anticipate, I guess one way to ask this would be, doesn't that put you in control?
Nobody has control. Nobody should have control. I've been around the track a few times. I've seen some different scenarios. Our state's had its ups and downs. We're on a pretty good up right now, but nobody's in control. There's 181 legislators and the presiding officer of the Senate, the governor. We're going to have a whole lot of other changes too, up and down the slate, from land commissioner and ag commissioner and comptroller and railroad commission, Supreme Court. So it's a very refreshing time, I think, ahead. And my prediction for the session is that it's going to be orderly and not as scary as some people are predicting just because new people are coming in. I think it's going to be fine. Texas is in pretty good shape. We need to continue to be focused on those issues that the House, I'm very proud to say, has been focused on: education, higher education, infrastructure, and making sure that we have a well-trained workforce for the opportunities that are coming to this state and that we want to keep coming here.
Where's the agenda going to come from? You know, one of the observations people have made about this particular election cycle so far, we've still got 7 weeks to change this, is that not much in the way of a mandate is coming out of this. It's not like a clear voters want X and Y and Z. And you've walked this line between, you know, the House, let the will of the House prevail and let the Speaker just preside over that. And at the same time, I guess in the last session in particular, there's 2 or 3 things that you wanted to get done in a general sense to give them some sort of direction. What's the mandate this time? What's the session going to be about? And who's going to set that?
Well, I'll hopefully be involved. But you know, I mentioned the hive of activity that the Capitol is right now, several weeks before an election. We're working on issues right now. We announced recently, I think, something that's going to, over time, become a very important reform to how we do our budgeting. Mm-hmm. The strategic fiscal review. We're going right now looking at somewhere between a dozen and 20 agencies, some really big, important agencies, putting them under the microscope and asking some fundamental questions, not just how much money do we give you last time and how much do you need now. We're asking the fundamental questions about the mission that their agency is asked to perform, and are they doing it? And if they're not, why not? And is it a matter of money or not? You may well see some agencies that don't exist as a result of this. You may see some agencies that get better funding because of this deep dive. So it may not be very exciting to talk about, but I think it's going to be a very important budget reform for Texas. We're also continuing to do some very important work in budget transparency. Right. This last session, Representatives Otto and Darby did an outstanding job whittling away what was about a $5 billion dedicated account problem we had, where we were piling up money in these dedicated accounts, but we weren't using them for their intended purposes. Right. In one session, what took 20 years to build to a $5 billion issue, 20% of it has gone away. We're going to continue to do more of that. I made an announcement this summer that I think will be a really strong boost for transportation funding, and that's that for the first time in almost a century, gas tax revenue, fuel tax revenue is going to go to transportation, and transportation only.
Where are you going to get the money to replace that? This is money that goes from the gas tax right now to the Department of Public Safety and some other things.
Right.
And if you direct it toward transportation, you're taking it away from something. What are you going to replace it with?
We'll fund the Department of Public Safety. We'll find it. I mean, it's one of the core.
But you see what I'm asking?
Functions.
You're talking about a lot of money being moved into transportation and away from other things.
This is a good year to be doing it. The economy is doing well.
Yeah.
I think we'll be in good enough shape to be able to end the diversions in transportation and adequately fund the Department of Public Safety at the same time.
We've been in sort of a mode for a while of, voters have been pretty price sensitive. They're against taxes, they're against fees, they want, to tamp some of this down. There's been some emphasis in the last 2 or 3 years, some of it coming from you, about sort of a more product sensitive, well, we got to do roads, we got to do water, we've got to do some social infrastructure, education, whatever. Are we in a place now where Texas is going to spend some more money on some things, or are we in a place where the state needs to be redirected? Is there anything going on now in state government, in the budget area, and in program areas that's evolutionary in a significant way, or are we sort of in a holding pattern? We're going to keep doing the things we're doing, only better.
Well, let me talk about water that you mentioned. That was one of the, I think, signature achievements at the last session. Right. And it was not easy, but it was a very creative approach and a very successful approach to addressing maybe the most important challenge the state faces, and that's an adequate supply of water for a growing population. And it would have been easy to say, well, tough, go it alone out there in your local communities, but we didn't. And Chairman Ritter did a fantastic job. He was creative, he was fiscally prudent, and put together a program that will kickstart tens of billions of dollars worth of local water projects across the state. Did it in a way that was very constructive, did it in a way that, and it wasn't my first choice to pass a constitutional amendment that was subject to approval by the voters. Mm-hmm. I called it California-style governing. I didn't like it. But the Senate wouldn't go along with my approach, which was just to vote it up or down. Turned out to be a blessing in disguise because, and I for losing that argument, I got to chair the campaign statewide to pass it. But it was a good experience and proved that if you bring people together and you show that your elected officials are really trying to solve some problems, and we had industry, and we had conservation groups, we had agriculture, we had rural people, we had Republicans and Democrats, and that thing passed 73%.
It was only a scratch, though, wasn't it? I mean, is this the right perception that it was, you've got something that's been described as a $53 billion problem. You've got a $1 or $2 billion bond issue that passed last time.
No, it was a $2 billion commitment by the state that leads to $53 billion in
so you think this
bonded projects.
So you think this?
That's why it was creative. It was a very, very. It wasn't passing $2 billion in bonds for $2 billion of projects. It was passing $2 billion from our rainy day fund to another fund, a revolving fund. It's not, the money isn't going to be spent. It's going to be put out to get projects started and for them to be financed with other debt.
So does that work in other areas? Does that work with roads? Does that work with education? Does it work with higher ed?
I don't know. If it does, we'll try to do it. I'm not sure it does in other areas, but it worked for water, and I'm very proud of that accomplishment. And I think, again, it sets the template for what I want to see more of from the House, which is creative solutions to really serious challenges for the state.
Do you think the state's going to get, one of the big things that got left on the table, there was a lot of discussion about it, there was a lot of debate about Medicaid expansion. And it's basically, the state was in a position more or less to put $10 billion into Medicaid and draw down $100 billion over a 10-year period. And for a variety of reasons, the legislature and the governor and some of the other leaders turned that down, but that's a recurrent question, and you hear it a lot from the hospitals, you hear it a lot from the medical community. Is that coming back, and where are you on it?
Well, it was very clear the legislature wasn't going to approve a Medicaid expansion because they didn't trust the federal government to live up to its side of the bargain. Mm-hmm. And that over time it would get out of hand, be unsustainable for the state to continue. And I don't quarrel with that. What I said then, and what I still believe, is that we can't do nothing. That our local communities, I live in San Antonio, property taxes are going to pay for a lot of care that could be handled in another way. I hope we find some market-based solutions. We're looking at some other states as examples. I talked to the speaker in Indiana recently. They've done some things that are innovative that they think the federal government's going to support. Some things over in Arkansas I don't know enough about to be for or against, but we need to be looking for something that Texas can do that politically is acceptable, and that gets us off this reliance of our hospitals having to rely on property taxes and raising premiums in the private sector to cover for health care that's being delivered.
Is there a way to get more money out of taxpayers in a way that's more, not more money, is there a way to get money out of taxpayers in a way that's more acceptable to them? We've got the school finance case. We don't have a statewide property tax. There's been a suggestion if we had a statewide property tax, we would at least have the school finance cases out of the way. Maybe that's right, maybe it's not. We have these arguments in the legislature about property taxes for hospital districts, and we're not opening federal funds that are available to us. How do you get out of this?
Well, generically, the best way to raise revenue from taxpayers in a way that they can accept is to grow the economy.
Right. But we've been doing that, and we've still got these problems.
We're doing it, and it's working. Specifically to your point, though, there's always a better way to conduct our tax policy, and we're going to have a thorough debate about property taxes and sales taxes and every kind of tax that's out there, and we should. Okay. But growing the economy is the main goal, I think, that we have, and continuing the private sector growth that leads to more tax revenue and therefore services that that can keep up with the population growth.
Let's talk about your main dance partner. What do you think of the Texas Senate? They've gotten, for the Senate, there's been an extraordinary amount of turnover. And if the elections go a certain way, we could have 8 new senators this time. It looks like in most cases, not in every case I don't think, but in most cases, everybody who leaves is replaced by somebody who's at least a notch or two more conservative than they were. It's a more conservative body than it was 2 or 4 sessions ago. Walk me through this.
Well, I hesitate to get too much involved in Senate business with the false hope that they'll stay out of ours. But I don't worry about it too much. I think that being a senator is a very important position. We have 150 members in the House and only 31 over there, so each one of them has an enormous responsibility for a lot of people. Right. And I think that once they're sworn in and once they see what the legislature, those that weren't in the House and don't already know, that once they see what work is required and only 140 days to do it, they won't have that much time for the kind of, maybe some of the campaign rhetoric that doesn't directly translate into the job that we have to do, like passing a budget.
That's kind of the question. Are they going to send you a bunch of stuff the House just can't or won't pass?
Well, we start the budget this time in the House, so we'll help things get started.
Uh-huh. What are they going to be doing while you're starting the budget?
I don't know. That's their business, but I don't think it's going to be a problem. Mm-hmm. The system works when you let it, and the voters may have voted for more conservative replacements for senators that didn't come back. And that's the way they describe themselves. But Texas is a conservative state. The work of the legislature the last few sessions has been a conservative outcome. So I don't think it's going to be a remarkably different way of doing business.
Do you think the House is going to go in the same direction? The Senate's been getting more conservative. Do you see that? How do you see politics evolving over the next 2 or 3 years?
Well, we have a very strong Republican majority. It's going to be a conservative legislature, but it has been since the 2009 session. It has been a conservative legislature. We've passed balanced budgets. We've provided tax relief. We've given more local control to the school districts, and we've protected the Second Amendment. And go down the list. We've done a lot of things that are considered conservative, but we've done it in a way that doesn't shut anybody out or doesn't give people an alternative voice. And I think you'll see more of that, more of the same.
You're running for your 4th term as Speaker. How many are you going to do? The record's 5.
Is it? I don't know.
It is.
Okay. Well, I won't be setting a record this time.
How long do you want to do it? And
I really don't know. I don't want to be that old man you described me as earlier in the legislature. I don't know. I'm not in a hurry to leave, and I'm proud of the work that we're doing and totally committed to the next session. And I've always taken this one session at a time. I'm not good enough to look too far ahead or to do the job I have in front of me, which is a very challenging one, and at the same time try to think about doing something else.
Mm-hmm. You've had a bunch of turnover among the leaders in the House, which is, I guess, both a blessing and a curse for a Speaker, because your lieutenants are leaving, but you get to keep all the mob happy because you get to pass out lieutenantships. Tell me where you think things are there and what your thoughts are about committees and stuff.
Well, you're right. It is a blessing and kind of on the downside, you miss friends that you get really close to and admire a lot. But overall, it's a time of refreshment in the House, and I think it's going to be a very good thing. We have a lot of younger or newer members who have displayed a lot of talent. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of members that have been around longer than 1 or 2 or 3 terms who haven't had a chance to do what they really want to do in terms of leadership positions. I think you'll see some moving around. You'll see some new faces, new blood, and it'll be a good thing all in all. And it is good for a Speaker. I mean, very frankly, it is good for a Speaker to have a natural migration once in a while. Mm-hmm. And I look forward to new ideas, a fresh approach to doing things, and keeps things alive.
They're already writing a budget. They're already working on some things, as you say, in the Capitol going forward into this. But you don't have an appropriations chairman. Who's that going to be?
We have a lot of really good people on appropriations. The new LBB members that we just named, Darby and Otto and Zerwas have been doing a tremendous job under Chairman Pitts' leadership. They know what they're doing. Representative Crownover is another one who's very involved in the budget and taking on some other assignments related to the budget right now.
So you've named at least 3 disappointed people.
No, I don't think that's the case at all. We have a really good team of leaders in the Texas House. Clearly, they can't all be chairman of the same committee,
right.
But there's a lot of work to go around, a lot of really important leadership positions, and fortunately for me, and fortunately for the House of Representatives and for the state of Texas, there's a lot of good people to do the work.
Have you made decisions on some of these yet, or?
I haven't even thought about it.
Really?
Really haven't thought about it, no. And I don't ever think about it until the time comes. Some people would say I never think about it. But no, I really haven't. I want to see, I want to get through the November election. I want to get a little bit past that. I want to see how the interim reports come along from the committees that are working now. I want to see what the agenda lines up to be. And then when we get into the session, I want to talk to the members too and find out what they want to do. And it doesn't take too long. A few weeks after we start, we get things going and get it organized and run. It's a little bit like a sports team. You know, you got players with talents, and you've got to see where your offense needs the big guys and the fast ones and this and that, and then you work around it. Plus, the other part that's a little too much inside here, but a lot of the committee assignments are self-selected by the members.
Right.
And it's by seniority, and a speaker has to work through that too, get an idea of the self-selected members and where they're going to be, and that gives the speaker an idea of who I should appoint and then who the chairman should be.
Okay. I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to start taking questions from the audience. So if you have one, there's a mic over here.
They're still here.
And a mic over there. They're still here. They have the lights set so we can barely tell you're still here. But if you have a question, head for one of these mics. It's weird to be this close to an election and not be talking about threats from the election. You only have, if I'm really charitable, I'm curious if your assessment's the same. If I'm really charitable with the word competitive, there are fewer than a dozen seats in the Texas House that are up for grabs. And if all of them went one way or the other, it wouldn't really change the nature of the House much. Is that?
That's what I'm hearing. I mean, we'll find out.
All this stuff just happens around you.
That's what I really don't. I don't look at polls, and I don't live in Austin, but I'm aware, and I think that's probably a pretty fair assessment of where we are. I'll be working between now and November to help our good Republican incumbents around the state, and but I think this is going to be a cycle, and it has been through the primary and the runoffs, at least in the House. It's been good for incumbents. So I don't see a lot of change. I think we'll retain our healthy Republican majority and a lot of stability in the Texas House.
Okay. One perspective question. We have 4 people with strong or weak Texas ties, at least, running for the Republican presidential nomination or making noises like they might. Got a preference?
Well, I'll give you a hint. When I was a very young man, I grew up in a Republican family in San Antonio that was involved in the evolution of the Republican Party, the modern Republican Party, and we were very close to the Bush family.
Okay. So you're not going to be voting for Rand Paul? We couldn't get George P. last night to endorse his father. Would you endorse his father?
Well, I'm going to wait for George, I guess. But obviously I'm a big fan of the Bushes. 41 is my hero of all time, and we'll see how it develops. I don't know. It's a long way. I mean, never in my memory, or seldom in my memory, has there been at this stage, 2 years before an election, presidential election, do you even know how things are going to lay out? I don't know who's interested and who's not. but I suggest there are other surprises. I happen to know Senator Portman from Ohio and a huge fan of his. Heard some talk that he may be sticking his toe in the water. Not that I would be a disloyal Texan, but there'll be other choices out there too, and it all plays itself out.
Do you think
and it probably doesn't matter too much who the Texas House Speaker is for.
Do you think the Texans will run? Do you think Perry will run? Do you think Cruz will run?
Well, they sure look like they're headed that way.
Right.
But again, I think it's way too early to tell. I think you have to wait until maybe early next year to have a better sense of it.
Okay, great. Do we have any audience questions at all? Yes, sir.
Hi. Speaker, do you stand to gain financially from expanded gambling at Texas racetracks via royalties?
By what?
Royalties.
Well, my family would.
Thank you.
But
So this is
clearly, my family's been in horse racing and breeding for, since the probably 1920s. It's almost 100 years. And then later, I guess my dad particularly was very involved in bringing horse racing back to Texas since it was outlawed after the Depression. And he and my uncle were involved in Retama Park in San Antonio. All fully, disclosed, known. I'm not hiding from it. But the first thing I do every session is sign a form and into the record that I recuse myself from any type of gaming legislation, and I have been very strict about it. I don't even talk to other members about it, and nothing has advanced since I've been Speaker. So I'm very careful about that, and not trying to hide the ball. I'm not philosophically opposed to horse racing or to gaming. I think, it's a big world out there, and I stay out of it legislatively, but I hide nothing.
All of the gaming legislation the state has passed to date, lottery, bingo, horse racing, has happened in times when the state's budget was really tight. I'm curious if you see the environment for this to come up, if you see any issues, whether you're participating in them or not. Do you see this issue advancing? I guess we're looking at a couple of court cases just in the last week on historical racing where they run old horse races with the numbers stripped off. Seems kind of weird. But
I might be better at that game.
Do you think that there's going to be any kind of a push for gaming this
No,
time?
I don't think there will be at all.
Okay. Here.
Dennis Burrell, Coalition of Texans with Disabilities, Mr. Speaker. Our community care programs for citizens with disabilities and seniors are very cost effective, allow people to live independently, stay in their own homes, avoid hospitalizations, nursing homes. Yet they rely on a workforce where the floor wage is $7.86 an hour with no benefits, no paid sick leave, no paid vacation, no paid holidays. We see this as a crisis situation. Would you agree, and will you do something about it?
Well,
Okay, thank you.
it's a very good question and a good point, and yes, I would agree. I would agree it is. It's a problem. I think one thing that we're beginning to do about it, if you count it as an action, is a select committee that Representative Susan King of Abilene is heading up to expand the healthcare workforce in the state. I would recommend that maybe you weigh in with them and see what suggestions they might be coming up with to help with that problem.
I'll do so, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Speaker,
This is a Homer question. Right?
Councilman Cryer.
I think you know how much we in San Antonio appreciate your calm leadership in the House, but my question goes back to the conversation about transportation. And number one, thank you for your leadership in the effort to try to end diversions, which would put hundreds of millions of new dollars back into transportation. Over the last decade, we have seen the rise of public-private partnerships, comprehensive development agreements, and an expanded network of privately financed or government privately financed highways in this state, usually paid for with tolls. Is your long-term goal here to get Texas back to 100% TxDOT funded highways to meet our expanded highway need, or do you see an ongoing role particularly in our big cities, for privately financed highway construction?
I think 100% funding by TxDOT the way it used to be is a wonderful goal to have. And if it's going to be met, it's going to be met in the very long term. So I think as a practical matter, in order to keep up with infrastructure demands, if our state continues to grow and our economy and industry continues to grow and puts the demands on our existing road infrastructure the way it has, I don't think we're going to get to 100% in the near term. So other ideas that are locally supported, I think, would be in line.
Are we getting forced back to pay-as-you-go by the fact that we've sort of used our credit and we've kind of got our toll roads, I don't know what the maximum for that is. But
Yeah, well, some of us don't have a problem with pay-as-you-go or being forced into it. Maybe it's been the only way we could find money for transportation is through debt. And we have maxed it out. We can't go any further there. In fact, we ought to be looking at that very carefully, make sure we haven't overextended. But I think these initiatives, Proposition 1 that's on the ballot in November, which is not a sustainable long-term solution, but it's a helpful step to increasing transportation funding. And I think it'll pass.
Do you think it'll pass like water did?
I don't know. I think it'll pass healthily. It should. Right. But the ending the diversions, those two things together are several $1 billion additional to transportation funding just in the near term.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah, hi, my name is David Wiley. I'm from San Marcos. And Mr. Speaker, I want to tell you, I've been coming to these events for a number of years, and I appreciate you. You're one of the few speakers who actually says, "I don't know," instead of going back to.
It comes naturally to me.
Yeah, well, good for you. Yeah. So that's kind of the point of my question is, you seem to be thoughtful, deliberative, and very moderate in the way that you approach everything. How frustrating is it for you to try to manage the fringe elements of your own party who are into hyperbole and extreme positions when you're really looking for thoughtful, evidence-based, data-based solutions to our problems?
I hope he has better luck
Well,
than I did.
I'm not going to say I don't know here. I don't manage those people you described, and they don't manage me. But I try to help manage the House to set an example that is unlike Washington, D.C., where we try to come up with solutions to the really important challenges. I love the fact that we have a limited government system in Texas. We meet 140 days every other year. There's not time to go outside the lines too far. Just focus on what's important: education, higher education, infrastructure, resources, and pretty soon those 140 days are eaten up just doing the things you have to do, public safety. And so I don't worry about politics too much as long as we get our job the way that I think we've been doing it in the House and the way that I like to work. I want to keep us as far away from the polarized, do-nothing Washington as we can get. And I hope that Washington will heal itself. I hope that they'll look to the Texas House for examples on how to reach across and make some accommodations with one another when you have divided government, and start thinking about longer-term solutions. People are hungry for government that's efficient, that's effective, and that they can believe in. These national polls are abysmal. Was it 9% approval?
Right.
It's reflected in the voter turnout. You've written about it.
Yeah.
One of the strongest signals a public official can have right now is how many millions of people are not voting. They're not even holding their nose in voting. They're looking the other way and going as far away from us as they can get. And it's important to me, as long as I'm in public service, to not fall into that trap.
Thank you.
Okay. Got time for a couple more. Yes, sir.
Mr. Speaker, first off, I think there was a missed opportunity to truly thank you with a significant round of applause for your leadership on this water issue. I really do. It's not done by any means, but your courageous leadership along with House members and others for doing that, I think will be a hallmark on your career. Two quick questions. One is, when UT Austin plays UTSA, which side of the field will you be sitting on, number one?
That I can answer.
Okay. All right. Number two, Number two is Georgia just surpassed Texas as #1 in the country for recruitment and attraction, according to all the site selectors, which is the first time in over a decade that we've dropped to #2. Part of it dealt with perception of the business climate in the state. The other one was water one more time. So at the end of the session, but also more importantly along the way, what's the message that you want the legislature, in a sense, to signal to the rest of the world that this is still an innovative and competitive state?
Okay. Well, let's talk about UTSA football. Coach Coker's done a great job. They surprised Houston in the first game, and they're on their way. All right, now to the unimportant question. I did see that where Georgia has, surpassed us in whatever ranking that was. We're still #1 in most of them, most of the rankings. But we can't rest on our laurels or take anything for granted in terms of job creation. The numbers that we've had in the last few years have been astounding and something to be really proud of. One of the other initiatives we haven't talked about here today is one that we put in place this summer, headed by Representative Button from Dallas, that's looking at all economic incentive programs in the state of Texas, all of them, not just the ones that are in the headlines all the time, Enterprise Fund and Emerging Technology, but 313 and all of the rest, the whole thing, to make sure that what we're doing in Texas is absolutely up to date and effective in terms of attracting jobs to the state. Economic development is critical that we get it right. Some of our programs that we have in Texas may have outlived their usefulness. Some may need to be tailored a bit.
As a general matter, do you think we should have incentive funds of some kind?
I think we need to do whatever it takes to continue to grow our economy. I don't want to unilaterally disarm, but we need to make them right. We need to make sure they're fair, and that they truly are effective in bringing jobs here, not just window dressing for jobs that might come anyway.
Okay, great. I'm getting the hook here. Give a warm round of applause to Mr. Straus.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good to be with you. Thank you.
On to your next brackets.